Front and Center. A focus on important and significant developments affecting the lives of Filipinos, not only in the Philippines, but also those living and working around the world. Join us in Front and Center. Here on Radyo Pilipinas World Service.
Good morning to all of our listeners here on Radyo Pilipinas World Service. Welcome to another edition of the program Front and Center, where we put very significant issues affecting our country, the Philippines, as our program title says, Front and Center. On behalf of our colleague Jerome Toledo, I'm your host for today, Steph Vicente, joining you all for a 30-minute worth of talk discussing important matters with our government officials, people from the private sector, or even members of the academe. As seen through our video live streaming, you may watch and listen to Front and Center through our Facebook page. Just search Radyo Pilipinas World Service. The same goes for our replays or re-uploads in our YouTube channel. Meanwhile, we also have an audio live streaming thanks to the Evox PBS Receiver app. You may download the said application via Google Play Store if you are using an Android phone, or via App Store if you are using an iPhone. Once you have entered the Evox PBS Receiver app, just find the logo of Radyo Pilipinas World Service in order for you to be able to listen live to our programs such as Front and Center. For today's edition of Front and Center, we are going to talk about about the remarks of Japanese Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi linking a Taiwan Strait crisis with the possible deployment of Japanese troops, prompting Beijing to unleash a flurry of economic reprisals and threats of more retribution. According to a BBC report, the current tensions were sparked at a parliamentary meeting in Japan last Friday when an opposition lawmaker asked Prime Minister Takaichi what circumstances surrounding Taiwan would count as a survival-threatening situation for Japan. The Japanese leader responded that if there are battleships and the use of force, no matter how they think about it, it could constitute a survival-threatening situation. It is noted that a survival-threatening situation is a legal term under Japan's 2015 security law, referring to when an armed attack on its allies poses an existential threat to Japan. In such situation, Japan's self-defense forces can be activated to respond to the threat. Takaichi's remarks drew immediate ire from Beijing, with China's foreign ministry describing them as egregious. To know more about this, we are now joined by foreign policy and security analyst Professor Renato De Castro. Professor De Castro, welcome to the program Front and Center. This is Steph Vicente of Radyo Pilipinas World Service.
Good morning, Steph, and good morning to our fellow Filipino listeners. And this is I'm coming from Paris.
Yes. So, what time is it there, Professor De Castro?
It's 2:45 a.m.
Oh, it's early in the morning there, while here it is 9:55 in the morning. Thank you again for joining us in the program. Professor De Castro, what was your initial reaction on the statements made by Japanese Prime Minister Takaichi in regards to China and Taiwan?
Well, first of all, this was part of an internal parliamentary debate within the Diet. So she was reacting, of course, to a fellow Japanese member of parliament, and in a way, she's making a statement that just in case you have a push comes to shove in Taiwan, because of its geography, because of course its historic link with Taiwan, you have to understand. Taiwan was a colony of Japan for about 50 years. There's very close people-to-people relation in Taiwan, the same way as we have close people-to-people relation with Taiwan. And she made the statement, and in the context, of course, if China would use force, and he emphasized, that's why she mentioned the term battleship, so forth. So in it's a hypothetical situation when China would use force, this will be seriously taken into account by Japan as a sovereign, independent country that, of course, has vital interests beyond the Japanese island. And of course, this also reminds me, if everyone could remember, to what President Ferdinand Marcos said when he was in India last
Hmm.
August, when President Marcos was asked by the managing editor of First Post, which is a very prominent Indian media outlet,
Hmm.
when he was asked almost the same question. He said, we will be dragged, we will be affected on the basis that we have 250,000 Filipino workers in Taiwan. And again, because of geography, we will be affected. And of course, you have the same vicious reaction from the Chinese Foreign Ministry. This is a term used, a wolf warrior approach by the the Foreign Ministry of China.
Mm-mm. Professor
So
De
that's
Castro.
that's my reaction. When I heard the strong Chinese reaction to our
Hmm.
statement, this reminded me. This is not new. We experience it ourselves.
Hmm. Yes, and I would just like to ask, how serious from the Chinese side? How serious is their accusation that Japanese Prime Minister Takaichi's comments constitute gross interference in its internal affairs?
Well, that is, of course, if you will accept what is called the one China principle, in
Hmm.
contrast to what we call one China policy. There's a nuance to this. Huh? Of course, the Chinese approach is always based on the one China principle, which has two very important components. It's something we have to understand.
Hmm.
Number one, there's only one legitimate China, where, of course, you would station your diplomatic post and you would interact with that China on a normal diplomatic relation because you recognize that China as a sovereign independent state. The second component is what you call that Taiwan is simply a province of China. That is
Hmm.
what we call the one China principle. This is what China wants countries to adopt. Of course, this is also based on Chinese national interests. This is the approach of the Chinese Communist Party to, at least ideologically end the long-standing Chinese Civil War without actually winning. Because we know for a fact that the Republic of China is in Taiwan.
Hmm.
So the approach there is that the Republic of China does not anymore exist because, Taiwan is simply a province of China. Most countries adopt what we call a one China policy. Countries would generally accept, number one, we would deal diplomatically with the recognized China, that is, of course, in Beijing. But when it comes to the second part, they don't accept that Taiwan is simply a province of China.
Hmm.
So if you would adopt what you call the one China principle, with China, of course, basically dictates upon countries to adopt, including the Philippines, then indeed, China is correct. But most countries reject number two or come out with something, they come out with a diplomatic ambiguity regarding the second provision. Because most countries in the world, although they have their diplomatic post in Beijing,
Hmm.
maintain an informal embassy in Taipei.
Yes. Hmm.
So that's how countries basically, in a way, dilute or more or less come out with their own unique one China policy. So we have to understand that's what China is imposing to almost all countries is the one China principle, which you have to swallow everything
Hmm.
that the Communist Party is telling you. That number one, of course, there's only one China, which we could accept. We could have the other one, of course, is Taiwan is simply a province. Of course, again, I don't know if you remember when President Marcos greeted when President Tsai of Taiwan got elected,
Hmm.
he was not, of course, assuming his position. President Marcos greeted them. And again, you have the reaction of China
Hmm.
because China expects country to simply swallow without any question the one China principle, ignoring the fact that sovereign independent countries are entitled to have their respective one China policy. So we
Hmm.
have to understand the nuance. Beijing, China is always coming from a one China principle. Almost all countries in the world adopt a one China policy, wherein, of course, they modify, they dilute the second component. Because if you go to Taiwan, you will never see a flag of the People's Republic of China. And
Hmm.
in a book by Bill Hayton about the invention of the Chinese state, Taiwan has never been part of the People's Republic of China.
Hmm. Mm-mm.
So you have to understand the nuance. Unless you want to swallow without any question the formulation of the Chinese Communist Party, that is, of course, the one China principle.
Hmm. For my next question, Professor De Castro, what would be the significance of China publicly warning Japan of all consequences if it intervenes in the Taiwan Strait? Is this a typical diplomatic language or a sharp or already a sharp escalation?
It's a sharp escalation because the calculation in Beijing is that when, of course, Japan made that position, Japan is a power to reckon with. Japan has, of course, although the Japanese economy is not anymore the second largest economy in the world, it still has a very modern industrialized economy. Plus, also China would have to take into account when Prime Minister Takeshi mentioned that the Japanese self-defense force might be mobilized and be involved in a Taiwan situation. China takes into account Japan still has a very powerful self-defense force. It has a modern, well-trained self-defense force that is, of course, aligned with the United States Seventh Fleet. So this is the concern of China. If the Japan would intervene, and of course, if Japan would intervene, it's a matter of what we call Japanese national interest. Because what is at stake is, of course, the Japanese national interest. The same way as China is also trying to threaten us
Hmm.
when we had made that statement. I don't know if you remember when in April this year, when General Romeo Browner made a
Hmm.
statement in the Northern Command, when he said the coverage of the Northern Command is not anymore Mabulis Island, it extends up to Taiwan. Because again, we have a vital interest in Taiwan. That's 250,000 Filipino OFWs. And again,
Yes.
we received the same vicious wolf warrior diplomacy from our Chinese friends in Beijing. I think they even uh, 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 summoned our ambassador in Beijing to scold them that we are again violating, quote and unquote, the one China policy, which again is actually a one China principle.
Hmm. Mm-mm. Um, Professor De Castro, meanwhile, what does this whole situation tell us about Japan's evolving approach when it comes to Taiwan?
No, it's not just Taiwan.
Yes.
It's, of course, a realization in Japan that began during the term of the late Prime Minister Shinzo Abe.
Mm.
Should take an active role, of course, in maintaining security and stability in the Indo-Pacific region. Japan, of course, has vital interests as an island nation that has, of course, extensive trade relation with other countries in the world, and of course, its alliance with the United States. So we're seeing, of course, the evolution of this policy. Again, if I have to talk about a hypothetical situation, if push comes to shove in Taiwan, there, of course, a possibility that the United States would become involved.
Mm.
Although the United States maintain a one China policy, although slowly the United States policy of what we call strategic ambiguity regarding, it will get involved in a Taiwan contingency is slowly eroding ever since, of course, during the term of former President Joe Biden,
Hmm.
when he was asked if China would attack Taiwan. This was in Japan, no?
Yes.
President Joe Biden said, we will get involved. So in the light of this, recognizing the fact that if the United States would become involved at the Taiwan contingency as a very reliable and capable U.S. treaty ally, Japan will also become involved.
Hmm. Mm-mm. And now, of course, we'll go to how this would impact our country, since, of course, we have our own share of tensions with China. So, why should, aside from the fact that there are many overseas Filipino workers in Taiwan, why should the Philippines pay or pay close attention to this whole dispute?
We are Taiwan's closest neighbor. If you have a major, armed contingency, army base, we will be affected simply on the basis of geography. So I remember, again, can I quote President Marcos when he was asked this question?
Sure.
And I think this was in February 2023, and he repeated this last August. From his hometown of Lawag City, he could see Taiwan. So our president has a very keen appreciation and understanding of geography and geopolitics. Simply on the basis of our geographic proximity, will be affected if you will have a Taiwan contingency. Again, remember again the usual Chinese reaction. If China wants us to adopt its one China principle, number one, we have to ignore geography. Like Taiwan is a big hole out there; it does not exist. And number two, we would simply have to their distorted notion of history, that Taiwan is simply a province of China, that they have eventually, of course, overwhelmed and defeated the Republic of China, which actually still exists in Taiwan. You will not see any flag of the People's Republic of China if you are in Taiwan. You'll be arrested by the Taiwanese authority if you raise the flag of the People's Republic of China. But that's, of course, part of the myth. The same way as China propagates the myth of the 10-9 line. So if we accept the myth of China that Taiwan is simply a province of China, then we will also have to accept its myth regarding the South China Sea. That the Chinese navigators have navigated and controlled the waters of the South China Sea since time immemorial.
And of course, if tensions, hope that this would not happen. If tensions escalate in the Taiwan Strait, what are the possible effects on the Philippines' national security?
Number one, we will have to plan for a massive evacuation of 250,000 Filipino overseas workers in Taiwan. This is I cannot imagine the nightmare of implementing a plan to evacuate 250,000 of our fellow Filipinos that will definitely be caught in a crossfire if they have a Taiwan contingency. Then we also have to factor in modern warfare. You have, of course, missiles firing, fighter planes coming and going. We will be affected. We will be hit one way or the other. And of course, we also have, like Japan, this is something we also have to take into account. Like Japan, the Philippines is a treaty ally of the United States. And of course, we have a security partnership with Japan. We have now the reciprocal access agreement with Japan. Japanese self-defense force could conduct training here in the Philippines. And right now, we're also negotiating for an access, what this term here is logistical access arrangement, AXA, with Japan. Access cross logistics exchanges, just in case that will be agreed upon by the two countries.
And since you have mentioned our ties with Japan and the U.S., could this whole situation prompt the Philippines to further deepen defense ties with Japan and the U.S.?
We have already. Again, we also have to rely on our treaty ally and, of course, Japan. Not only in the case of Taiwan, which might have contingency might happen. Primarily because also confronted by Chinese maritime expansion in the West Philippine Sea, South China Sea. How the entire nation had watched how the Chinese Coast Guard, Chinese militia are harassing our resupply mission in Ayungin Shoal, threatening our presence in the Pag-asa Island, and of course the tension that's happening in the Scarborough Shoal. So right now, if I'm looking at it, let's say from the Armed Forces of the Philippines, from Malacanang, we're actually confronted by Chinese expansion in the South China Sea and also in Taiwan.
And of course, how might an unstable Taiwan Strait affect the Philippine maritime security in the West Philippine Sea? Most especially, of course, our fisher folks who are fishing there along the West Philippine Sea would surely be affected by this.
Yeah, everything will be affected. Trade will be affected. Even, let's say, the residents of the Batanes Island will be affected. Even our people in northern Luzon, they'll be affected. We simply don't know how a conflict, a major conflict in Taiwan would spill over into northern Luzon the same way it will also spill over into southern Japan.
And of course, what from your perspective, Professor De Castro, what diplomatic stance should our country take regarding all of this?
Number one, of course, diplomacy is a necessary element, but we have to back our diplomacy with the military capability. Diplomacy, if you conduct it just simply relying on diplomacy, is simply, filing diplomatic protests that the other side would simply ignore. Diplomacy should always be backed with the military capability. At the same time, we have to strengthen our alliance with the United States, our security partnerships with Japan, uh, Australia, and other like-minded countries.
And aside from that, what further steps should the Philippine government prepare in case that this would further escalate?
Number one, what is important is national unity. We cannot afford people in our society that's trying to divide us at the time that we are confronted with a quintessential security challenge, Chinese expansion in the West Philippine Sea, South China Sea, the importance of national unity, of patriotism, that every Filipino should take into account that I'm part of the Filipino nation. I cannot afford to be part of a movement that is trying to destabilize, divide the Filipino nation. The very essence that will ensure our survival is national unity. So we have to be very wary of individuals who are trying to divide families and trying to divide communities, and more importantly, trying to divide the Filipino nation. Starting, of course, is trying to divide a family.
And
I don't think I need to go further about this matter.
go ahead.
Yeah, no, just dividing a family is simply also a major effort to, undermine, create cleavage, fragmentation within the Filipino nation. Our president has been very emphatic about this. I remember when he was campaigning, the importance of national unity. So I still remember our president, despite the fact, when he was a candidate, how people would criticize him. But he kept quiet. He maintained his demeanor because according to him, I cannot afford to just, react to this accusation left and right because my goal is national unity. Let's support our president in his effort to foster national unity at the time that the country faces an existential security challenge.
That's one lesson that we should take, and most especially that the current political situation here in the Philippines. And with that, thank you very much, Professor De Castro, for joining us here in Front and Center. Unless you have a final message for our listeners, go ahead.
That's it. Again, I would like to repeat what our president was, when he was campaigning, the very important of national unity.
And with that, thank you so much again. Until next time, God bless and mabuhay po kayo.
Thank you very much.
And we were just joined by foreign policy and security analyst, Professor Renato De Castro. Wherein we talk about the recent remarks made by Japanese Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi regarding Taiwan. And at this point, we'll be ending today's edition of Front and Center. We would like to thank first our technical staff composed of Milo Jonella, Susan Aison, Hiro Lucero, and Justin Osias, who made this program possible. Thank you as well to our station manager, Mr. Ray Sampang. Until the next episode of Front and Center, on behalf of Jerome Toledo, this has been your host for today, Steph Vicente. Good day and stay safe, everyone.
You have just heard and watched Front and Center. Front and Center. Join us again for another edition here on Radyo Pilipinas World Service. Front and Center.